I think the challenge for Kevin Stefanski with a few extra days to get ready for Washington is going to be to have that game plan ready to pivot to pass the ball if they are stacking the box to take away Chubb and Hunt. Not that it matters, because I feel like they already are trying to take away the run, but Hunt and Chubb are so good, you can't take away the run. They're going to get their yards. That offensive line getting it done for the Browns. But for the Browns, if they can just continue to grow that passing game, and you hit the nail on the head with Odell Beckham Jr., and this is why I've said all week they should trade him, and I still believe they should trade him. I'm not going to change that opinion simply because he caught a touchdown pass last night and caught 3 other passes. He does not fit with that team, especially if the answer is to run the ball and run the ball and run the ball some more. The good news for the Browns is if he has performances like last night, he actually has trade value. The Monday after the original game of the season, you look at Odell Beckham Jr. and say, why would anyone want him? The Friday after the second game, you say, yeah, okay, there's something there if they end up deciding to move on from him. And Peter, I think that you raised this point. He's not going to be happy if they run the ball this much. Well, then now's the time to sell for whatever you can get for Odell Beckham Jr. And I don't feel any differently about that simply because he had a good game, not a great game last night.
What do you really think the market value is right now for Odell Beckham Jr.?
Well, here's the thing. Who would have thought last year the Patriots would give up a second-round pick for Mohamed Sanu and the 49ers would give up a third-round pick for Emmanuel Sanders, both of whom just finished the season with those teams. Sanders left in free agency. Sanu got cut. So I don't know. There was a report from WFAN in the offseason that I think the Vikings and the Giants supposedly talking about a second-rounder for Beckham. I think a second-rounder would make sense. A lot of it depends upon what he does between now and whenever that contending team, as it approaches the trade deadline, decides, let's make the move. But I think at a minimum a second-rounder, don't you?
Well, I'm not that concerned about what the compensation is. I wonder how many teams want that anchor of a contract. How many teams are going to take on a huge payday, that he basically will carry with him, knowing that he's not necessarily going to be happy and he's not going to be content. So that's the big question to me. Not that, okay, a 2. Look, right now to me, if New England could solve its receiver problems by waving the magic wand of a second-round draft choice, I bet that Bill Belichick would do it. The Patriots are going to have major, major problems with their receiver core this year, in my opinion, the exact same as they had last year, because they're the same guys minus Mohamed Sanu. So I think Belichick would like the player. Would he like the anchor of on the salary cap that Odell Beckham brings?
Well, the financial aspect of it going in is not as significant as you would think. He's got a $14 million salary this year, $15.5 million compensation package next year, $14.75 each of the final 2 years of the deal. But the thing is, at some point, he's going to want a new contract when you see what DeAndre Hopkins is getting, when you see what Julio Jones is getting. If he goes somewhere and he's effective, he's going to want to rip up that deal and replace it with another one. So that's a separate issue. But I think the Patriots make the most sense for him. A lot of teams would not be able to absorb Odell Beckham Jr. and get him to comply with the way they do things because there's that constant expectation you're going to get him the ball. And I'm a firm believer in the quarterback throwing to the guy who's open. The hell with trying to get the ball to a certain player. That just drags down your offense, and it creates tension and frustration, and that's been one of the problems in Cleveland. And it's not going away just because they won last night, because anytime they lose, that's going to be item number one. Did you get the ball enough to Odell Beckham Jr.? But he's craved this idea of going to New England. Now, once he gets there, if he gets there, he may feel differently about the Patriot way and what it does to you, to break you down, to get you to comply, to get you to submit, to get you to quit thinking about your own individual accomplishments. But I feel like that's what he needs. I think he needs someone who's going to put it to him straight, who has the authority to get him to forget about how many catches he has and just focus on winning. He seems to be focused on winning. And, when I looked at the Patriots-Dolphins game from last week, there was a stretch early in the third quarter where there were a lot of guys open, kind of in the underneath zones. That's the area where if you hit Beckham in stride, he's gone. So you combine Cam Newton and Odell Beckham Jr., that offense could be scary. And the thing we know about Bill Belichick, you never know what the hell he's going to do until he does it. So would it surprise either of us if all of a sudden between now and the Tuesday after Week 8, Odell Beckham Jr. becomes a Patriot? It wouldn't surprise me, and I think it's the move that makes the most sense to get the most out of Beckham, to help the Browns, and to help the Patriots.
Yeah, I think they're the most logical team without any question. I think Bill Belichick definitely is going to be able to have the juice to do it, that especially if they are in a good place at that point. If they're a couple games over 500, something like that, and it looks like this division easily could be theirs, then it wouldn't surprise me at all if they did that, as you say. I just wonder whether Bill Belichick is going to think he's worth it. Or would Bill Belichick say, give me the steadier Allen Robinson, and we will pay for him, and we'll give him a new contract? Because the one thing about Allen Robinson that differs, differs from Odell Beckham Jr. is that Allen Robinson, for the vast majority of his career, you've never heard a word out of him, he's more of a Belichick guy, I think. But again, I agree with you. I think that if any team in the NFL makes sense for Beckham, it's New England.
And let's hear from Baker Mayfield regarding what happened with Odell Beckham Jr. last night. The relationship between those guys, so critical. Let's listen to the words and study the facial expressions of Baker Mayfield as he talks about Odell Beckham's touchdown from last night.
What did you see on the touchdown to Odell, and how nice was it to get an explosive play with him?
One-on-one coverage. We ran first play of the game, ran a keeper to the left and did the comeback, and so kind of just saw how the guy was playing it, and he was real aggressive all over him. So we knew that we were going to have a shot at that, come back to it, called it at the right time, and he ran a great route.
Peter, I saw the Seinfeld tell. Did you see the Seinfeld tell? Anytime you touch your face, that means the relationship isn't going great. He went like that. The higher you touch, the worse the relationship. Yeah, it's going good. Yeah, it's all right. We got to get out of here. There it is. There it is. It's the tell. Look, I'm just kidding. The problem is it's never been natural between Odell Beckham Jr. and Baker Mayfield. And it's funny because earlier this week they said, well, it's got to be natural, and we're really working on it. No, that's not how it works. It's either natural or it's not. And it's just not. And that's okay. At some point, it's fine to admit that it's not working. The best teams admit their mistakes instead of doubling down on them. And I know some Browns fans out there are thinking, what the hell? You'd think we'd lost last night, but this is still something that is an impediment to the long-term growth of the team, right? Am I wrong that this team would not be better off based on what we saw last night to remove that constant source of tension and stress that comes from this compulsion to get the ball to Odell Beckham Jr.?
Well, I don't know that is there. Well, let's see if it's there the same this year as it was last year. Because the one thing that we don't know, Mike, let's say the Browns go on a 3-game winning streak. Let's just say, and I'm not saying that they will, but let's just say they do. Let's see how Odell Beckham, if one game he gets 2 targets, and let's say this coming week, they beat Washington by 20, he gets 2 targets and they run for 190 yards. That obviously is a great game for the Cleveland Browns. So if Beckham is grousing about that, if he's clearly unhappy, then all right, then let's see. But I'm willing to give him a few weeks to see how he acts this year. And let's just see what happens. But I think they have plenty of time to make this decision. I don't think this is a decision they have to make on September 18th. And I would give them the chance, for this to work this year.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.